Good afternoon to you. Mark Sudduth, HurricaneTrack.com, here with your off-season edition of the Hurricane Outlook and Discussion for the 15th of February 2016. Hope you're having a good Monday. Let's take a look at the current sea surface temperature anomalies for today. There you go, the 15th of February. Notice off of Africa here, very warm compared to where it should be. I'll talk about that more in a minute with a zoomed-in shot. And then the El Nino over here clearly fading away. Sort of the flame starting to fade out just a little bit. This is the close-up of Africa that I mentioned, and the main development region out here several hundred miles to the west. Very warm anomalies, and we'll have to watch this closely, obviously, as we get into the hurricane season, still several months away. You know, does this expand more to the west? Does it go away and reverse to cooler? We'll have to wait and see. But right now, that is some very warm water compared to where it should be, near the Cape Verde Islands there, and then of course butting up right against the western coast of Africa. Now let's go back to the wide shot. This is what it looked like at the beginning of this year. This is back on January the 4th, and look at all that warm water in the equatorial Pacific. And if we go to today, it's very clear, bright, not so bright, and yeah, it's starting to really fade out. And to that end, you can see the very cold water compared to normal. Again, these are the equatorial temperature anomalies in the subsurface. This would be the top of the Pacific Ocean here, the surface, and this is down several hundred meters. And you have the eastern Pacific over here on the right side, and the western Pacific over on the left side. And this is kind of like a cross section. So here's your El Nino showing up, but here is this very large and growing area of subsurface cold anomalies. Some of these anomalies -4 to -5 degrees Celsius, and it's just a matter of time, as I have mentioned, that this will dominate and take over. And the various models from the Climate Prediction Center and the International Research Institute agree with that. El Nino dying away over the next few months, with the probabilities of La Nina here in blue increasing to around 50% by the time we get into the fall. I think the more important thing, whether or not we go into La Nina, okay, that's a toss-up, but the fact that the El Nino has almost, well, we won't say no chance, but we're right about 10 to 12% probability here at the peak of the hurricane season, getting rid of the rest of this heat out here in the Pacific Ocean, and the rising air that goes with that will more than likely allow for a busier hurricane season in the Atlantic, just the absence of the El Nino going back towards neutral. If we get into La Nina, that could make it even more favorable for the Atlantic, but we'll wait and see about that. Right now, the model's suggesting what we have thought, and that is that we will see a return to neutral, and then maybe La Nina by the time we get to the fall. Actual sea surface temperatures, this continues to amaze me. There's the 26-degree isotherm Celsius-wise, so that's about 79.5 degrees Fahrenheit in the southeast Gulf of Mexico. Nice little loop current showing up there, and we're, you know, at the midpoint of February. The sun angle getting higher in the sky, days are getting longer, and so this water overall is going to start to warm up and fill in around the Gulf over the next few weeks. And any massive Arctic intrusions, or what we call cold air advection, blowing across, you know, with cold fronts to disrupt this and cool it off, probably too little too late. And it's not that the Gulf, you know, it's always going to be warm enough for major hurricanes, but it's just interesting that it's warm this early, so maybe we would see some early season development in May, preseason, and maybe the first part of June, something we'll have to watch for, since the water is already warm and the atmosphere could be primed for that. We'll just have to wait and see. Off the Atlantic coast, quite a temperature gradient. The temperature difference over the temperature, I guess it is the difference over the course of distance. Difference of temperature over distance. Too many D words there. The temperature gradient here pretty steep off the Carolina coast, meaning that there's warm water, and then shortly thereafter, over the space of a short amount of distance, is fairly cold water. Probably wouldn't want to go and swim in that. Wetsuit required. Not quite as cold as it was up here, even though we had sub-zero readings this weekend. Water temperatures a little warmer than they were last year. It was a brutal winter, especially February. Not quite as bad in 2016, but still cold enough that I won't be going in anytime soon. And this too will start to warm up slowly as we move through the next several weeks, since we are past the shortest days of the year, and probably the strongest of the Arctic outbreaks hopefully have come and gone. I'm not a big fan of cold weather. I'm starting to appreciate the blizzard, the coastal blizzard, a little more. Those are fascinating, sort of winter's hurricane, if you will, the cousin to a hurricane. But overall, I like warm weather, so bring it on. Looking at the lower 48 today, speaking of warm weather, we do have sort of a tale of two seasons going on. Still plenty of cold weather in a good deal of the nation. We'll call it from Greenville, Spartanburg, north, all the way up to the Canadian border in Maine up here. Now, down in the deep south, we have warm air and instability, and unfortunately the threat of tornadoes. If we look at the radar across that region, let me see if I can find the big radar. There it is, the high-resolution version. Scroll down. Unfortunately, we do have in this warm sector quite a bit of instability and a few supercells trying to take shape in Mississippi and parts of Alabama. So please keep weather aware in this area. And then this whole mass of rain and some chance of thunderstorms with that will be moving into the Carolinas. And the frozen precip issues for the Carolina Piedmont will eventually abate for the most part as a warm front lifts north and this area starts to moisten up a little bit and get above freezing. And the triangle, the triad, maybe not so much for the mountains and the valleys up there, but interesting that we went from very, very cold and record lows, and then this area, especially where my office is, we're going to be darn near 70 degrees by midweek. Now, looking ahead at lower 48 weather, since we are still in the winter season, are there any additional big winter storms on the horizon? Well, let's take a look at the GFS from 12Z today. This is the current map. If we move out into time, this is over the next several days, you clearly see this convective mess swinging through the Carolinas. Going to be a wet one here in Wilmington and all up and down the Carolina coast, unfortunately. And then on up into New England, temperatures above freezing from I-95 and points east this time around, so the snows that have fallen and any frozen rivers and lakes are going to get rained on over the next couple of days. And then this will advance for me. It's not advancing. Why aren't you moving? Let's see if I can get it to go to the next frame and cooperate. So over the next few days from there, this low way back here off the coast, so it's far enough inland that, again, the warm side of it is going to be far enough inland as well to keep the snows to a minimum. But then moving on out into time, you see another storm system that comes into the western part of the United States, unfortunately not far enough south to bring Southern California much needed rainfall. But then the pattern kind of quiets down for the most part, with the exception of the storms kind of going across the northern tier states. But then watch what happens as we move out into time. We'll get some interaction down here, energy trying to gather and focus along the Gulf Coast. And so as we get towards days 8, 9, and 10, the chance of a low developing here, somewhere along the Gulf Coast, and then riding up along the East Coast in a classic nor'easter pattern is starting to rear its ugly head. See? So move out into time, day 8, 9, and 10 here. There it comes. And, yep, right off of the Delmarva region, once again, pretty strong easterly flow, northeasterly flow into the coast. Rain and heavy snow, etc., etc. Bottom line, we're going to have to watch this, seeing some chatter about it on some of the social media sites, and those who follow winter weather more than I do starting to really talk about it. Maybe towards the end of the month, another big snowstorm, East Coast type nor'easter, whatever. I don't want to say blizzard yet because we don't know. It's way out in time. But this is sort of the first shot across the bow, if you will. We want to watch that and see how it evolves. So maybe later in the week I'll post another video if this continues to show up in the models. If not, then this will be it until next week. Remember, I do these updates once a week unless we have something to really talk about. And maybe we will. Have a good rest of your Monday afternoon. As always, thanks for tuning in. I am Mark Sudduth for HurricaneTrack.com. This has been the off-season Hurricane Outlook and discussion. I'll talk to you next week, if not sooner.